Welcome everyone to our Committee of the Whole meeting. Before we call the meeting to order, I'll just give a bit of information about how we're planning for the evening to go. So this meeting has been scheduled for you, people here and people watching online. We are here intending to take questions on the draft 5-year financial plan and provide clarity on areas of interest. If you're in the audience, you can participate when we get to the public input period by raising your hand. I will welcome you to the front microphone where you'll be asked to state your name and address and then ask your question. For those of you who are watching at home, you can submit your questions in 3 different ways. The first one is via Twitter at City Port Alberni, and please include hashtag BudgetPA2020. The next way is via Facebook at City of Port Alberni, and we have an event page that's set up, or you can send your questions through Facebook Messenger. And the last way is by email, citypa@portalberni.ca. Staff will be monitoring the channels and grouping questions based on their subject matter. If there are questions of similar nature, the questions will only be asked once. If committee members or staff are unable to provide an answer to your question tonight, the question will be further investigated and a response will be brought back to a future meeting. We ask that everybody please be respectful, clear, and concise when asking your questions so that everybody is able to get time to ask their own questions. And for comments and general input received, please note that the information will be collected and shared with council as part of a future meeting. So we will call our meeting to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations. We have an agenda in front of us. Council, would somebody like to move approval? Second. All in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the February 3rd, 2020 meeting that was held at 7 p.m. Okay, is there a seconder? Any questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor? Carried. So the first item on our agenda before we get to question period from the public is unfinished business. And we have the 5-year financial plan, bylaw 2020 to 2024, bylaw number 5003, with a report, I believe, from Acting Director of Finance. Sorry, Deputy Director of Finance and Director of Finance, possibly the CAO also.
Madam Mayor, the report is actually a joint report from the Deputy Director and myself, so I'll ask her to choose the microphone and she can help me present that report.
Thank you.
And the report's on the screen and it's in your agenda. Looking in the background section, first paragraph, the city's financial plan is a working document which continues to be revised throughout the budget process as new information and decisions are made, information made available and decisions made by council, or direction by council. For the March 10th meeting, the attached financial plan document has been updated to include 2019 actuals. That's money actually spent and earned or received. It should be noted that those actuals provided are not yet audited and therefore could be subject to change. Further to this, there are some capital expense and reserve transfers that are yet to be finalized for the 2019 year. So there could be some changes. So those unaudited actuals should not be relied on. If you have questions, by all means ask and we'll tell you if there's still work to be done on those lines. Scrolling down in the report, there's a table on page 2 which tells us what changes have been made to the draft financial plan, 2020 financial plan, since council last gathered in this format to consider budget. And I'll ask Deputy Director McCauley to explain the chart.
So listed in front of you is the basic carry forwards that we brought from the 2019 and how they have impacted our budget, as well as some gas tax reserves and some moving of funds to also impact the budget. So first, we'll take a look at training and development expense from 2020 operating budget. So we've taken some remaining funds from 2019 and we have moved them forward to be expensed in the 2020 budget for $41,474. This is no impact, basically us bringing prior carry forwards into the budget, and it is going to be expensed in 2020. So therefore you will see no impact. We're bringing the funds in and we're taking the funds out basically. Snow and ice removal expense, we did see a surplus this year of just shy of $93,000. We are going to move this into an operating reserve, so therefore taking it out of any revenue or expense and moving it into a reserve for future years where we might see a heavy snowfall. For our capital, we did have some prior projects that either have been rescoped or completed near or under budget that freed up some of our gas tax reserves. So I was able to do some moving around of funding. So 110,000 of the gas tax reserves were carried forward. So I was able to move from operating fund, which was in our current tax increase. So I was able to take some of that operating funded project money from the paving on 6th Ave to Argyle to Angus and move that out of our operating fund and into our capital works for 60,000. And same with our new welcome sign project. I was able to use some of our capital works fund for that as well and take out 50,000 from our operating budget and move it or fund it from reserve. We do have also transfer of other capital gas tax reserve money from prior years. So I was able to also transfer capital funding for our relining program as well for $100,000. So that moved out of operating and the money will be funded through reserve. And you will see here also, I did have the Bird Street, Anderson and 17th Avenue water main replacement project coming from our gas tax reserve. The project is development driven, so therefore we are able to use some of our DCC reserves, and so I have shifted funding from gas tax to DCC reserves. So total impact is $210,000, so bringing our impact to the average single family from 5.3% down to 4.3%.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Solda.
So just the quick question on the signs. So I noticed it in the budget as 150, so we're just taking from the gas tax and putting in the 50,000, is that right? And knocking off the 50 from the 150, is that?
That's correct. So we've reduced the amount coming out of taxation. So 100,000 will come out of the operating general fund, which is taxed, and then 50% of that will now be funded through our gas tax reserve funds.
Okay, so Madam Mayor, so where I want to go, I think that's great, but we're still not ready to move ahead with the signs, and we might, I don't know when, because we were talking about applying for grants at one particular time. Is that correct on this? Am I wrong?
I don't think grants have been a conversation for the sign. What we are waiting on is a report outlining costs of similar signs that we're looking at from other municipalities.
Okay, and do we have an idea when that particular report will be handed to us? Will that be in a couple of months, 3 months?
Madam Mayor, I would expect that report would be in front of council in weeks rather than months.
Okay. Okay, because I still would like to have deferred 50,000 till we're ready to move on and have it for next year. That still will help bring down the tax. It's not, we can still take it from the gas tax the following year if we have to. I mean, it's something to consider. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from council on this portion? Okay. Could I just clarify on the changes from the one that's coming from gas tax? That is coming from a prior year gas tax, so not this year's gas tax. So a project that didn't get completed or was under budget in a prior year.
That's right. These are projects that were rescoped or completed, and the gas tax monies were unused from the prior years.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Seeing no further questions, I think we can continue on.
Madam Mayor, the next section in the report, under the heading of alternatives and options, I want to first point out, as it says in the report, that there are some remaining options or things for council to consider as you sit as a committee right now. And I think it might, if council wants to proceed in this way, I would suggest that we work through these items one by one. We review the report, council asks questions if you have them, gather the information that you need from staff, and then once we've completed the entire report, that will be a really good time to start to bring questions in from the public. Or we can take questions as we go, if you like.
We're going to go through the report and then have public input. And then if council wants to give further direction, we would do that after we've heard the input.
That's a better plan. Thank you. So, Madam Mayor, I'd point out, first of all, it's our staff's impression that what we're doing in pointing out these options, they're meant to serve council's vision, and I would point out to you that we believe council's vision to be remaining committed to the current services delivered by the city at the current levels delivered throughout the 5 years of the budget, remain committed to the city's strategic plan, and minimize the impact of taxation on all taxpayers, not just the owners of single-family residences. So I point that out because the metric we're using to measure tax increases is single-family residences, but this draft budget does not put an imbalance of tax load on any other category. So it's any tax increase is currently spread across all classes equally. So with that in mind, moving forward, the first item for council's consideration is use of surplus from a prior year, and Deputy Director McCauley has some information that she's better equipped to deliver than I am.
So along with our carry forwards from 2019, we did have a contingency budget of $240,000. That budget was not fully used. Therefore, there are amounts of $183,948 that could be carried forward for use of council's direction. So those carry forward funds, they don't have to be carried forward. They can sit in surplus reserves to be used in future years, or they could be carried forward to the projects that we have listed below for consideration. So they will not be taxed. So any of the use of this funds will not be taxed. They have been taxed in prior years.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there any questions on Councillor Solta?
Sorry. I'm just kind of curious, when you talk about the contingency, where is it coming from? Which contingency fund is it coming from?
I think this is the surplus for the year,
surplus?
so it includes the contingency fund and any other budgets that were surplus.
Okay, and you were talking about for the rail service, the contingency could be used for number 2, like you were talking about?
So
you mentioned?
Yep. If you, in this report for consideration, there are other options available for trains. There's also daycare space creation project. There's also consideration to draw from other funds or reserves if required. So if council does want to explore any of the options below, we would just like to make you aware that the funds are available.
Okay, thank you.
And I think to follow that, we could use these funds for anything we want, not just the projects listed below. These are just projects listed below that we're already working on budgets for.
I realize that. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, seeing none. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, moving along, item number 2, rail service. The Industrial Heritage Society has presented council a budget to maintain and operate the city's steam locomotive and passenger cars on a limited schedule short track basis. So that's between the train station and Stamp Avenue. With council's input and interaction, IHS has provided several budget options. So I've summarized them as option 1, 2, and 3. I note that the Industrial Heritage Society is represented in the room, and if you'd like to take input or clarification from them, I'm sure they'd be happy to provide that. So option 1, pulling from IHS documents, I've characterized that as 162 runs, 3 runs per day on Fridays and 4 runs per day on Saturdays, with a budget request from the city of $170,732. When council asked for an option that required less support from the city, less financial support, I just provided a second option, which was significant reduction in the number of runs, 34 runs over 10 operating days, and that was $97,800. And IHS did provide the option that if council desired to have no rail operations, so no train movement on the tracks, but just to continue to invest in repair of the city-owned steam engine, that IHS requested a $30,000 budget for that from the city, and that would also include some improvements to the track that is owned by the city, which is between the Argyle Street and Catalyst property. And you'll see the paragraph below. I recommend that if you proceed with option 3, and I'm not suggesting you do, but if you do proceed with option 3, I would recommend that you add a further $25,000 and assign that to the city's engineering and public works budget for the purpose of improving city-owned and Catalyst-owned track. So that, and the reason I suggest that is if council lands on option 3, then you clearly will be indicating that you want the steam engine, the steam locomotive to operate, and at some point in the future operate on tracks. And if we're going to do that, we should get our tracks in order so that we're ready to do that later this year or in a future year. So that's my summation of the rail issue. Council can ask questions of staff or IHS or move on at this point if you like.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Solda.
I'm just kind of curious to know how the IHS feels about like option 3 and fixing up our end of the tracks, and I would like to hear what they would think.
I have an idea of how IHS will feel about
Yeah.
option 3, which is not running trains.
I know,
But we
I know.
certainly can ask a
Because-
member of IHS to come forward and comment.
Because we were talking about fixing tracks too for the future, so I think.
Frank Street. Yes, obviously we would like to see the train running to meet some of your strategic plans to increase the tourism in Port Alberni, and so meeting with option 3 doesn't give us anything that other than building for the future. So obviously we would like to see option 1 and give the full tourist option, where number 2 gives us more of a mid-island package that we can offer to the tourists, but not a regular package. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there follow-up questions? I have one. How is the steam train doing right now?
They're getting ready for a static pressure test on the boiler. The tubes are all in now and welded in place. We're just waiting for a few minor parts, and then we'll put a pressure test on the boiler to make sure that everything is sealed. And then once that's done and certified by the inspectors, then we can start putting the equipment back on it and the lagging and getting it back ready for operation.
Do we have an estimate of when you expect it to be complete?
That I can't give you an answer.
And when, if, for option 1 or option 2, what would be your target start date? I think my question is really, I'm concerned about the train not being ready still at this point, and having to go into, if we're looking at 170,000 or 97,000, if it ends up taking into July for the train to be fixed, and I don't know if that's reasonable or crazy for it to take that long.
If we just
Sure.
maybe, Bert, you got a feel for what's happening down there? Bert has been helping out down the roundhouse and more involved than I have been.
Bert Simpson, 4460 Wellington Avenue. The steam train, hopefully we'll get it running this summer. It's a big job. We've dealt with a boiler inspection branch like you did with the arena. We think we're past that hurdle, but it's a lot of work, and we're certainly hoping. Like, the guys are coming tomorrow to do this NDT on the boilers, on the tubes, and it's a big job. I think, I would like to say at this point, I don't think the city realizes how much time, effort, and money the Boilermakers have donated to that project. Without them and their donation, we would never have a steam engine, seriously. The one thing we can set a date to run, we can run with the small diesel locomotive till the steam engine is up and running. To set a date is pretty tough because there's so many unknowns when you're dealing with inspectors and the steam.
Okay, so if it were to be, because I know we had talked a lot about possibly using the diesel if needed, or using the diesel because it would be more affordable to operate. And at the meetings that we had, I just didn't feel that people would pay for the diesel. So do you think that's I'm just trying to get a sense of if it's a viable option, or if we're just not ready to operate this year.
Well, one of the parts of the package that need to be done, so the track repair, the certification of operators, the insurance factor, all those things are fixed costs that are going to be regardless of what we do. Does the diesel give us much of an impact as the steam engine? No. But Duncan runs both. And obviously we would like to see the steam engine running as a bigger package that we can do. Hopefully that will happen. We're going to try our best to make that happen. If the first option is to run a weekend or two that is using the diesel and then try to make up lost time with the steam, that would be something we do. But if we wait until the steam engine is certified and ready to go and all put back together before council says, now we'll give you some money to do it, it's too late to even consider anything for the year. Even one Santa run requires the training of the operators, the certification of the track, all the maintenance done on the track, all the insurance coverage, regardless of how much we do. So the decision will be, it's either we're going to move forward and try our best to give you a steam engine package that is the best option, whether it's one or two. But if you decide now that you are uncertain about whether the steam engine will be ready for earlier in the season, then you have to go with option 3. Because to commit all that funds and then not run I can understand your position, but if we don't get option 1 or 2 right now, we won't do a whole bunch of other things that need to be done because we won't have the funds to do it.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful. Are there any other questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, if I could just get some clarification. This document I've got in front of me, and it's on page 27 of our package. It talks about option 2, and it says this proposal would see the steam train restored and used for 5 special weekends. The ride would be the same as the original proposal with runs from the train station to Stamp Avenue and back. The amount, this would amount to 34 runs, events such as the Steam Info, Spring, Summer, Steam Special, Salmon Festival, Halloween, Santa Specials. There would be a cost to have the rail infrastructure maintained and certified, as well as the train crews trained and certified. Estimate that we would carry 4,080 passengers with an average cost of $9.25 for a revenue of $37,740. The city subsidy would be $75,210. How is that different from what we've seen up there in regards to 97,000 or whatever?
I think that number you're looking at, that 75,000, was the original look at a lesser option. The revised options that I sent out in February was the 98,000 after we did a closer review on it at the request of council. So
okay, so this is an older
that's
document.
75 was the original back in November that we put together. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if we went with, per se, we went with option 1, that would deal with all the maintenance we'd have to do in option 3. It's all included?
Yes.
So option one would take care of 2 and 3, and 2 would take care of, yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
option 3 is the only option that additional, the CAO is recommending adding $25,000 to continue improving the tracks. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Haggard.
Did we confirm if, will the city insurance cover the trains running, or do they have to have their separate liability insurance?
As my recollection, I'm looking at Ken, is that options 1 and 2 include about a $30,000 figure for insurance. Option 3 does not. And 30,000 or 31,000 was the last estimate we had on insurance. And we asked our insurer for an update on insurance, and they said things are changing daily. And until we provide the insurer with a model, an operating model, then there's not a lot of point in them re-quoting. Yeah. So options 1 and 2 include insurance.
Okay. Any final questions on this? Okay. Thank you very much for the information. Okay. Moving on to item 3, daycare space creation project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So council has previously expressed an interest in the potential to access funding from the province's Childcare BC New Spaces Fund for the purpose of creating childcare spaces in Port Alberni. And council will recall this is 100% funding. If successful grant applications, there will be some startup costs to the city, but all capital costs beyond that should be covered by the grant. And so council has directed staff to explore further explore the potential. And in order to be eligible for up to $4 million in grant funding to create those daycare spaces, the city must submit, we believe we have to submit 2 grant applications at this point in time. So to be ready to submit grant applications that will have an opportunity or have a likelihood of being successful, the city needs to retain contractors to do the work. So we need to have somebody develop a project plan, facilitate stakeholders, help the city in selecting partners and establish agreements, develop preliminary building and site designs and budget documents, and interact with the granting agency on behalf of the city. So we've been working with 2 contractors, one Marcy DeWitt Consulting, and working with the group because they did the childcare needs assessment for the regional district in 2019, so they're very familiar with the topic. And we've been working with Waymark Architecture, who's done work for the city in the past, and we've asked them to provide proposals and then to work together to dovetail their proposals. So if the 2 of them were to work for the city, what does that work plan look like and what does it cost? And the cost estimate is $76,390. So if council desires to proceed with this project and engage these 2 contractors or other contractors who will likely have similar costs, then a budget allocation of that amount is recommended.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Solda.
So on the $4 million in grant, can't we, if we went ahead with the $76,390, can we take it out of the $4 million if we're successful? Hey, I've got to play this,
Well, that's
right?
a great question, and it's one I wish I could say yes to. So these startup costs are not eligible for the grant funding.
Okay, and one more question, Madam Mayor. Is there nobody in-house that could do something like this, or are we just,
We have staff to do the facilitation and project development. We have staff who have the skills to do that. We don't have staff that have the capacity to do that. So if we were to take this on, we would have to have 1 or more staff members put down other priorities that council has directed that we pursue, and I wouldn't recommend that we do that. We don't have architecture skills in-house, so we would still have to farm that out.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, in the backgrounder, it talks about the Alberni Valley. Is this not something that the regional district should help fund?
The Alberni Valley did the childcare needs assessment. They commissioned that report, and I'm not aware if the regional district is pursuing this grant stream or if they're able to as a regional district. The mayor is very well versed in this grant funding opportunity. She'll know more than I do about this. At this point, it's been considered as a city project. If you'd like us to pursue that conversation, we can.
Councillor Solda.
I would actually like you to pursue the conversation, and the reason is because we have Beaver Creek, and these childcare spaces aren't just going to be used for people in the city. It's also going to be regional outskirts like the Beaufort. It could be the Cherry Creek. It could be Sprout Lake. So you know, it'd be interesting to see, to do some exploring, and maybe we can get some money from the regional district on this too, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, the project has to be owned by the local government, so we're looking at city-owned lands and/or buildings, and there might be an opportunity for the regional district to lead and use city-owned land, or there might not be. If council wants, we can, if you direct us, we'll pursue that.
CAO, how quickly would the work be able to get done? There was a large announcement of some of these funds from the provincial government this week, and I think there's another date coming up for the grant application.
The proposals from the two contractors are attached to my report. I don't recall the timeline. I believe shows a March application date, or sorry, a May application date. There it is there. Thank you, Joelle. So if you look at the work plan, no, I'm wrong. That's the architects only. Yeah, if you can find the joint one, please. So looking at timeline, there's two grant streams, and one we know will be open in November, but the other one we expect a different timeline on. So I'm sorry I don't have that information right now. As you can see, there's quite a built-out work plan, and it envisions starting in March. So the sooner engaged on this, the more likely we're going to be ready for the deadline.
I think that's my question at this point. Is it realistic in your experience to get this kind of amount of work done for an application in May?
There's a lot of work to be done here. Most people would think that writing a grant application would take an afternoon, and it's just a matter of filling in the form. This requires that we develop the project first. So we are so not prepared for this because it's, we don't have, this is not in the strategic plan. It's not in any department, city department's portfolio. So we haven't developed the plan that would drive the project. So that entire work needs to be done. Ordinarily, that would be at the staff level, and because childcare is not city business, we're starting from zero. And so our contractors are going to have to do all of that work, including developing relationships for us, or helping us develop relationships with a society, a partner society, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of work involved, a lot of public engagement involved. It's going to take a lot of time. So I don't have the experience in this area to tell you what's expected or what's not. I have confidence in these two contractors that
Sure.
they can meet what they proposed.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay. Okay, I think we can move on to item 4. Draw funds from reserves.
So, Madam Mayor, remember what I said earlier around what we thought council's vision was? This one would fall under minimizing the burden of tax increases on all taxpayers. I have to tell you that drawing from reserves in staff's view is something we should do strategically and at the right time in response to unforeseen circumstances or strategic circumstances. We shouldn't draw down reserves to avoid taxation in the current year and to continue to provide services because that eventually we'll run out of reserve funds if we do that. So, but in the spirit of giving council options so that you can make the best decisions, there are opportunities to further draw down reserves because as the Deputy Director has already told you, we're drawing on some reserves already. And if you want to draw further down on reserves, we've identified in the Parks and Recreation Reserve Fund some projects in 2020 in the capital plan that could be funded from that reserve fund, and they're listed in your report and up on the screen. And again, while I understand council's desire to minimize tax increases, it is not good long-term financial planning to use reserve funds for operating. But that is an option available to you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
And I would echo that. I don't agree about drawing from reserves because our reserves are down. And the Parks and Rec Reserve Fund does not excite me to take the money from there. And the reason, Madam Mayor, as I stated before, I actually would like to, I asked a question prior meetings, what was the Parks and Rec Reserve started first? And I believe it was for a new pool, just to be but I could be wrong, so.
There was certainly a lot
to
of
be wrong.
discussion, council, around the Parks and Rec Reserve Fund being for a pool. I don't recall what was envisioned when it was first initiated. We do have a document that was on your agenda at a previous meeting, on which we didn't spend a lot of time, and it's attached to this report, and we can bring it up now if you'd like to look at the reserve funds and review. Rosalind can do that.
So I did actually go back and research the Parks and Recreational Fund and look at some of the definitions and examples of what it's been used for in the past and why it was established. So the Parks and Rec Reserve was established in August 2000. Scott Kenny had plans for this fund to be used for properties and facilities. So there was they didn't give anything specific for the pool, but it was for infrastructure and upgrading the current infrastructure. So funding for this reserve comes from 10% of all parks and recreation revenues deposited, as well as 100% of revenues from any log sales from any wood removed from city property. So examples of prior contributions at work in this reserve are the Bob Daly Stadium track, as well as multiplex upgrades. So those are kind of two examples I found that we have taken funds from this reserve before, and they're basically the only projects that have been funded through this reserve. So it is infrastructure driven.
And Madam Mayor, just say that as everybody in this community knows, that a new pool eventually will have to be, and I know this reserve doesn't even come close to what a new pool is going to be, but I would really hate to see us wipe out the reserve, or take money from the reserve, not wipe it out, but take money from the reserve, and maybe there's something we can cut in the budget to help mitigate some of the things that, of course, that Parks and Rec does need to replace and fix.
Council, are there other questions about this reserve sheet? Does anyone have any questions or comments about the reserves themselves or the balances? Councillor Corbeil?
Well, just on the reserves themselves, what kind of interest do we get on these? It seems kind of counterintuitive that, you know, we're running a fairly large deficit in some areas, and then we're putting money aside, and I think we get next to nothing in interest rates. Could you fill me in, please?
Well, our investment policy works towards basically maintaining. We don't want to. We want to protect our reserves. So, you know, the higher the risk you're going to lose. So we want to invest in 100% guaranteed investments. So we're very risk averse. We want to protect our capital and protect our reserves. So at this point in time, our investments are almost 100% GIC and mutual pooled investments with that 100% guarantee.
So the likelihood is they're probably barely keeping up with inflation. Is that correct?
This year, actually, we did quite well. I don't have an exact return amount for a whole. But you can look in what we have budgeted and what we've had made over the last few years. We've certainly been increasing the interest earned on the accounts and looking at, you know, other reserves that we only may touch once a year. So looking at extending the fixed term to a year and investing in better opportunities that are available.
Other questions from council? I have a question then. How is it determined how much we're putting into our reserves every year? And specifically for the Parks, Recreation and Heritage, assuming I'm looking at the right spot in the budget, transfers to capital, to general capital fund, or transfers. There's, anyways, Parks, Recreation and Heritage, 250,000 one year, 141 the next year, 300,000 the year after, 370 the year after. I'm assuming those are our transfers into that Parks, Recreation capital fund.
Correct.
Might not be, but how are we determining in which years we're putting what amounts?
So what we do is we determine, we look at 10% of all Parks and Recreation's revenues. Also, 100% of any log sales go in there. So if we do see a spike, it could be because of some log sales. I can tell you within, between 2017, 2018, and 2019, it will only be the 10% of revenues that you see in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that, and it's possible I'm just seeing the wrong spot in the budget here, but for 2020, it says 141,000. 2021, 301,000. 2022, 370,000. I'm on page 10 of the budget document.
Okay.
And just in the first top paragraph. And this might just be the wrong transfers, but it does say Parks, Recreation, and Heritage. So I had assumed that was the reserve, the funds we were contributing to the reserve. And if you don't have the answer right now, that's fine.
I don't have the exact answer right now, but I'll look at it. It could be for other initiatives as well that the funds are transferred through. I'll have to take a look and see what it's what makes up that number to be sure, but I can
Sure.
definitely get back to you with an
Thank you.
answer.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no other questions from council on this, and I think this is the end of the report. There's nothing else for staff to update on. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so the line that you're looking at, Madam Mayor,
Okay.
is actually our injection. This is also our capital spend. So this line actually refers to capital fund transfers. So this is actually relates to money we're injecting just into capital. It doesn't relate to the actual
reserve
transfer into
specifically.
the reserve.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if there's no more questions from council, I think we will open it up for public input. We will start with the audience. Is there anybody who would like to come forward? Come on forward. An eager hand up right away. Have to be more eager. Yes, and if you don't mind just stating your name and address, please.
My name is Tana Savulat. Address is 3957 on 3rd. I'm here to deliver a message from Dog Mountain Brewing. Dear Mayor and Council, please consider this a letter of support for some of the strategic initiatives proposed in the 2019 to 2023 Corporate Strategic Plan. Specifically, we would like to convey our support of the improvements to 3rd Ave and the trail connecting Harbor Key to Victoria Key. First and foremost, Robin and I would like to thank the city and all of its employees for their hard work and support of our project, Dog Mountain Brewing. The city of Port Alberni worked with us to rezone our property, approve development permits and building permits in a period of about 6 months. We know owners of similar businesses in other areas that did not undertake the level of building improvements as us and took much longer to complete their projects. We recognize and appreciate the city for its support of new business and are glad we made the decision to invest in this community. As a new business that has invested in the area, we are excited to see this city support improvements to our area of town. We feel that by doing so, the city is sending a message to investors and new businesses that Port wants to attract investment and is willing to do its share to support it. We have also already seen quite a lot of tourists on their way to and from Tofino and Ucluelet coming through town to visit our establishment. Oh, listen. We feel that beautifying the area will encourage tourists and locals alike to walk through the uptown and potentially support our businesses in our area while they visit us. Please note that we feel parallel parking is safer than the current angle parking, and we feel that preventing vehicles from accidentally driving into facades will be an improvement to the safety of the uptown area. With regards to the trail connecting the two keys, we're excited about that as well. We walk our dog to the Harbor Key almost every day and feel that having a nice, safe area to walk our dog further along the inlet would only help our city attract visitors and residents and improve the quality of life in our city. Free recreational activity in this area would be a great improvement to support healthy lifestyles. We feel that these investments are great for the local economy. They will provide employments for city workers, contractors, and vendors. These investments will bring more people to the area, and encourage investment in real estate in this area of town. These investments will help increase commercial property values, which will increase the city tax revenue without burden to the average homeowner. There will also be more good jobs in construction, trucking, etc. We are excited to see these improvements and hope that a loud minority of people who are against progress do not distract leaders of the city from steering the city in a good direction. Thanks for your time and consideration of our input. Please keep this project in the budget. Cheers. Andy Richards and Robin Miles, owners of Dog Mountain Brewing Limited. Oh, that was a mouthful. Sorry. That's all.
Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have other members of the public who would like to come forward? Come on forward. And you have to introduce yourself.
Chris Washington, thank you for seeing my face up here again today. I'm going to be really brief. Just after the presentation, I wanted to applaud the city's efforts regarding childcare spaces. I sit on the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network and was privy to the information that was provided that we only have one childcare space for every 5 needed in this valley. It is desperately
Every
needed.
6 for
Every
infant
okay.
toddler.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for correcting me. It is a huge need in our community, but that is not what I came to speak to tonight. I don't want to repeat myself. You've already heard me several times, but I just want to thank you for what you do for our city. Thank you for being courageous. Why can't I get that word out? And progressive, and for looking to the future of our community and not allowing criticism, bullying, or threats of not being reelected to change your course. I really appreciate that. I know it's a tough job. I live with it every day. I hear about it every day. I just want to remind you, it's not the job of local government to start businesses, build housing, or provide the actual childcare, but it is incumbent on you to create the conditions to make this happen. And I think that this is what our strategic plan for the next 5 years is going to do for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, who would like to come forward next? Come on forward.
I'm going to be very brief.
Sure.
Myra Tassi, 6189 Lugren Road.
Thank you.
I was born and raised here, and I moved away for many years, and I have since had the privilege of moving back. And within that privilege, I have gained and earned respect in my new job. I admire all of you because change is so important. We can't sit stagnant nowhere in the world. So I just want to tell you, I am very grateful for everything you're doing, and I fully support any of your decisions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask our manager of communications if we have any online questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Indeed, we have about 15 questions online, and I'm happy to break into them now. I'll bounce around because there are blocks of questions that have come in from certain individuals, but to make sure everyone gets a fair shake at it, I'll move around. So starting off with the theme of insurance, the first question coming in, what was the outcome of the $218,000 increase in the city's insurance bill for 2020?
CAO.
Madam Mayor, our new Director of Finance is itching to respond to that question.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Mayor, so in response to that question, the insurance for the city of Port Alberni had to be acted upon, and we had to take steps to renew that policy. It expired at the end of January. Staff are currently reviewing and looking for opportunities to provide the right coverage based on the risk that the city of Port Alberni faces, and also looking at the most cost-effective manner to address that. So.
Thank you. Are there follow-up questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Solda?
So we paid the bill, basically. And so are we going to go look out for tender next time? What are we doing here? Are you going to make a suggestion about tendering? This is for the following year, right?
So, Madam Mayor, the intent is to bring a report back to council shortly, hopefully at the next meeting, and give you an update, and then we, at that time, we'll outline what we expect to do. So.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
So, continuing on the insurance theme, what did we finally pay for insurance, and what was the estimate from the co-op insurance that all other municipalities on Vancouver Island use?
Madam Mayor, what we are responding for this question is the premium that we paid was $485,000 approximately. This was up from the prior year of about $267,000 approximately. We approached the Municipal Insurance Association to provide an estimate. At that time, they said they could not provide that. What needs to happen is that we need to have a detailed review of our risk profile in order to provide that quote. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to investigate and bring that report towards council soon.
Great.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, and one final piece on that. What was the reason given for the increase over last year's insurance?
Yes, Madam Mayor, what happened is that insurance premiums are based on the risk of organizations that are covered within that group, and local government has seen an increase in the cost dealing with liability insurance. So with that, the increased premiums for liability saw a 70% increase year over year, and we looked at the additional assets that we're covering for the property that we own, and that was an additional 30% year over year. We had some assets that we added over the past few years that increased the value that we're covering.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up questions from council? Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Not a question, but just a comment that we all know insurance is going up year after year, whether you have any risk or additional liabilities or not. It's just the nature of the insurance game right now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So moving on to the theme of 3rd Avenue revitalization, what is the status of the grant for the 3rd Avenue bike lanes? If the City of Port Alberni does not qualify for the grant, will the project be shelved?
Thank you. And I think I'll just clarify first that the grant is not for bike lanes specifically. It is an active transportation grant, but for the whole project.
Thanks for that, Madam Mayor. I can tell you that the grant was submitted on time, and we don't expect to hear back before sometime in April. I don't have a date.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also on that subject matter, what is the status of the truck route?
Madam Mayor, I'm looking at the city's strategic plan. Goal 2.2 of that plan is heavy truck traffic is moved off of 3rd Avenue in Uptown District, and strategy 2.2.1 supporting that goal says develop a truck route, consider the utilization of existing streets and roads as well as new alignment or route options. So that is envisioned in the strategic plan. No steps have been taken to date to implement or to address that goal and strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Corfield.
Just on a point, when that strategic plan was put together, the thinking was that the Sand Group was going to build a small log mill down at the Catalyst paper site. Now we see they're building the small log mill at the old Colson site, and they'll be harvesting or running somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 cubic meters through that mill every day. And that'll mean chips and lumber will be going through town. So I think in our plan we're looking at the truck route potentially next year. I think it's something we might want to bump up and get on sooner rather than later.
And I think that's a really good consideration. I think that my opinion personally is that there's a lot happening right now in this industry, in the community. I would like to see us undertake another truck route once we see, how many logs are running through that mill and how much lumber is being run through town. We know that there's been a significant reduction, or that there will be a significant reduction once Mosaic is back up and running in the traffic they're bringing through town because of their investments in the Shoemaker Bay log sort. So I think there's some variables that are still up in the air, and we don't necessarily have a really good picture of how much traffic we're going to have, where it's going to be coming from and going. So before we actually implement a truck route, I would like to see us do another truck count, and I think it's premature at this point to do that until some of those changes are made and a few months in at least. But I agree, it may be more of a need going forward than it has been, and that would have to put it up on the priority list. Councillor Haggard.
Just in response to Councillor Corbeil's concern, the SAN group is investigating another route, so they won't have to drive through town. Whether that's going to come to fruition or not, I don't know, but they are looking at other possible routes. And also, I just want to add that I was under the impression that maybe we could detour truck traffic down Harbour Road, but there's a little piece that they can't go on, and I did not realize that. So we are going to have to be looking at something else.
The truck route is more complex than it's often thought to be.
Yes, it is.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering how our relationship is with Western Forest Products these days. I know back in the day with the original truck route, it required doing a little bit of driving through the APD mill site, and I'm not quite sure what happened with that communication breakdown that we had there with previous government, but I'm just wondering, are we friendly with Western these days?
I think the CAO might want to add to this also, but we are absolutely friendly with Western these days. I think we have an ongoing and a close working relationship, and certainly will even more so as they get back up and running at regular capacity in and around the community. I think what's important to note, though, is whether or not that Harbour Road route is used is about more than our relationship with Western. It may be about other industrial partners' relationship with Western, and there's more complexities to it than just whether we have a relationship with them or not. Did you want to add it all to that, CAO? Okay. I, myself and the CAO do have a conference call in the very near future with the CEO of Western, maybe next week, and we could certainly discuss the truck route as well. Councillor Paulson.
I just thought I'd maybe just clarify a little bit as far as the truck route. If Harbour Road is used, we do have, I think, city-owned property towards the catalyst that we could hook up to. The missing link is through APD's site, and we have had, in the past, we've had conversations with Western Forest Products about using the roadway right away or purchasing roadway right away through that. And it's been years and years that we've been talking about that, but just for the general public, that's kind of the two connectors. We have the connector on the one end, and the missing link is probably on the far end at APD. So
absolutely,
just that's kind of what we're working on, is we've been working on for years.
Sure. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Councillor Poon.
Well, I certainly agree that we should wait for those improvements to take place, and then from there we should analyze how the truck traffic is doing, and then make decisions from there.
Yeah, and I think the consensus is it needs to be a priority, and I think that everyone around here agrees with that. So it's how it gets done, may not be a simple solution, where it should be, and I think also making sure that it is still required given other investments that are happening before we expend a larger amount of money potentially on it. So thank you. Okay, maybe another.
Yes,
question.
Continuing on the theme of revitalization, is the city still planning to cut 3rd Avenue down to a 2-lane street and disallow truck traffic to use it?
I guess I could answer that one. So we've never stated that we're planning to disallow truck traffic from using 3rd Avenue. What our strategic plan does state very clearly is that we are working toward reconfiguring our downtown core area to be more pedestrian focused rather than vehicle focused. So that means slowing traffic down, and making changes that may make it a road that heavy industrial trucks likely won't want to use anymore. They may choose to go elsewhere. And once that work is done, I think a truck count to see where they've gone, if they have changed, if they're still using it, how many trucks are coming through the community, where they're going and where they're coming from, will be a really good next step.
It's only a start, right? That's about Argyle.
And yeah, so and Third Avenue is the first piece of this reconfiguration that we're talking about to make our areas more pedestrian focused in our strategic plan. There are other priority areas that our strategic plan talks about as well, and so our intent is to continue planning those projects and start public engagement on those projects in the very near future, and we have applied for a grant to help with some of that public engagement and planning.
Continuing on the theme of revitalization and moving down the hill, what's the status on the revitalization of the train station?
CAO?
I think that's going to be a two-person response. I think first we should hear from the manager of planning on the development of the RFP document, and then from the director of Parks, Rec and Heritage on our engagement plan. How does that work?
I think the director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage is eager to answer that question.
And I think planning has some input that would be helpful as well first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whichever you like.
Yep, so we're currently working with a consultant on developing the RFP, and it's currently in a draft form. I myself and Parks and Recreation are also working with heritage groups to get input on that RFP as well before it comes to council for your further consideration. So it's just in the draft form right now, but we're hoping to bring it forward to you in the upcoming months.
And further to the manager of planning, we have engaged the Heritage Commission. So of course the Heritage Commission is a group appointed by council, and so those folks have already been prepared, and we're looking at striking a bit of a subcommittee task group that will review the draft RFP before it gets distributed to public. So we're ensuring that we're integrating as much of the historical components to the RFP to be true to, of course, our sole heritage building in the city of Port Alberni.
Thank you. Maybe one more question from Alicia, and then we will take more audience questions.
Thank you. So this is a little further down the hill. I would like to see some tax money spent on the Harbour Quay. When is the Harbour Quay going to be fixed up?
Thank you. So CAO, you can correct me if I just happen to be wrong. Usually not. But I believe we have funds in our budget to make improvements to the Harbour Quay in 2021. It might be 2022. And there's some streetscape changes that we're looking at there, but we haven't really done planning for them yet. That will be a part of the process.
Very good. I'm looking at the Director of Parks, Rec and Heritage in case she wants to add in. So as we discussed last night or yesterday, there's funds in the budget for refurbishing the clock tower. There's also funds in 2022, I believe, for Lower Argyle, basically Harbour Road into the fountain to improve that streetscape. And speaking with the Superintendent of Parks today, there's some work planned, that's why I'm looking at the Director, work planned to restore some of the effects of weather and age on other structures at Harbour Quays. Because as we talked about yesterday, they're all of the same vintage, so they all need some restoration. So there's some operating expense being considered this year as well. But the question's a good one, and Council's strategic plan does address that issue. That the city or council should take pause and decide if we incrementally improve Harbour Quay and restore it as it ages, or whether we take a step back and do something larger or grander, a rebuild. And that's still on council's docket to address this year.
And I think the only other thing I would add from our strategic plan is we do talk about programming and getting the most out of the spaces that we have, and Harbour Quay is certainly a key space for making sure we're getting the most value out of that space. So I'm sure there'll be more conversations with our Director of Parks and Rec and our new Manager of Recreation back there on programming that space as best as possible as well. Thank you. So we will go to audience questions now, if there are members of the audience who would like to come forward.
Come on, don't be shy.
I'm going to pause for a moment in case anyone is just waiting to come forward. Okay, we will go back to online questions.
Thank you. So this one in from Carrie via email. I'm concerned that local crosswalks are not well lit and drivers have a hard time seeing pedestrians and cyclists. Does the city have a plan to make crosswalks more visible? If so, what is the plan and when can we expect to see the changes?
Thank you. CAO.
Madam Mayor, first I would suggest that strategically narrowing city streets helps to light both sides and narrows the distance that pedestrians have to be exposed to vehicular traffic. Having said that, I'd ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works to comment on intersection safety and lighting in general. That's a good one.
And just adding to that conversation, I think in our budget last year, we did look to add some money into in our budget last year, we did look to add $50,000 for street lighting. And I'm not sure if we maybe pulled that out before the budget was completed or if that is some funds that's available or has been expended already. You might not have that information today.
You're testing my memory, but my memory tells me that that was not put forward. So if I could have the question again, because I know it was a long one.
Does the city have a plan to make crosswalks more visible? And if so, what's the plan and when can we expect to see the changes?
So the quick answer, it would be no, we don't have a plan that I could say or put my finger on. It does come up quite a bit, particularly at the Advisory Traffic Committee. Certain intersections, and it seems like it moves around. There are certain ones that come to our attention. CAO is correct. I mean, our wide street crossings are an issue. Yeah, some people push for, pedestrian activated signals. We quite often will look to our counterparts at ICBC for some guidance. All those things, any type of signage or controls like that, they need to be consistent and they need to be based on warrants. So they quite often will help us out in that regard. Not to discount anybody's concerns around a specific crosswalk, but it is something that if it's warranted, it's we quite often or ICBC will contribute to projects such as that. But I know there are a number of crosswalks in the community that people come to us with concerns about.
Thank you, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's funny, my wife and I had this conversation about a week ago coming down Johnson Road where the street lights are on one side of the street and the crosswalk bars are on the other. The lights aren't over the actual crosswalks on Johnson Road, from Bilo down to Gertrude Street. And I'm just wondering if we could approach Department of Highway or Main Road or whoever's running that now to maybe move those over or something. It's just so ridiculous to see a brightly light intersection here and then there's somebody crossing on the other side. So
yeah, thank you.
Something to look at anyway.
For sure. And as a follow-up to that, I was going to ask the CAO if he could update the public on our current work with the province for Johnston Road. It's not specifically around pedestrian lighting, but it is around pedestrian safety and improving pedestrian safety in that area of the community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And you'll recall that when you met with the province at UBCM in September and you lobbied Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for improvements to Johnson Road, they responded by working with Wilf and his team, and we're meeting with them, I believe, later this month on some preliminary redesigns for the Johnson Road corridor. And as people know, that Johnson Road is a provincial highway. So we approached the ministry with concerns about pedestrian safety. And they're responding so far with a consideration of redesign, and we're hopeful that we can work with them. It will likely cost the city some funds for improvements behind the curb, as Wilf likes to say, but that's something council will consider at a later date. Wilf might have more to say on that.
Yeah, just Madam Mayor, the ministry has undertaken a planning study of the corridor. We haven't seen that planning study. I think they're going to unveil it at a meeting hopefully later this month. I don't think we have a date set yet, but I understand the study is done. Whether that includes drawings, I imagine there's a report and probably some drawings or some options. Yeah, so we're looking forward to seeing that, and we'll bring that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, do you have a follow-up question?
Just one more. Corner of Roger and Gertrude, when the crosswalk is actually engaged, there are two strobe lights that come across so that people can cross Gertrude Street. Is that an ICBC thing, or is that? I realize it's a city thing, but did we get some ICBC money, and could we continue that on other crosswalks where, when it's actually activated, there's something saying to Joe Sixpack going, hey, there is somebody in that crosswalk?
I'm not sure about the strobe lights, but I can certainly look into that, or look into what's different there compared to other places.
Well, it's just if you're coming down Roger to turn onto Gertrude, if there's nobody engaging the crosswalk, if nobody pressed the buttons, it goes like all three corners go to a turning lane. But if there's somebody actually trying to cross that road, there's strobe lights on both sides of Gertrude that actually activate, so that you look up and you go, oh, there is somebody in the crosswalk. And it's actually quite a brilliant idea, because if you travel that road back and forth every day, you sort of get into that lull, and it's a nice refresher. And if it's ICBC, let's pursue them for other crosswalks.
They're always open to improvements, for safety improvements. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil?
Yeah, two things. One, I've never understood the difference between the orange lights and the white lights. I almost want to go out and buy a lux meter myself to figure out which is brighter, because I could tell you, when I look at it, I think those orange lights are not as bright as the clear lights or white lights. And when I ask about it, I get well, some belong to Hydro, some belong to the city. I still haven't got that figured out in my mind, but I'm pretty sure that if we had all white lights, we'd have brighter intersections. Can you comment on that?
You're referring to the street lighting.
Yes.
So what you're referring to is as the white lights or the new LED lights? And
well, they're not orange.
There's an orange glow to the ones that are on. So the simple difference is, if it's on a metal pole, it's a city-owned light. If it's on a wooden pole, on a BC Hydro light, those are lease lights that we basically pay the power on with BC Hydro. So they own and maintain those lights. We just pay a flat rate for power.
Well, it seems like the majority of lights are these orange lights, which...
We're just over 1,000 BC Hydro lights in the community, and we're about 530 of our own. So that's how many street lights there are.
Okay. The second question, and you may have it, or it wouldn't be difficult to get, would be to get some statistics on which intersections we're having pedestrians hit. We know recently we've had some pretty serious injuries and fatality on 3rd and Butte and Gertrude and Southgate. And the width of those roads is, it's a football field. And I don't think we have to change the entire road, but if we had a bump out where at least the crossing wasn't so far, and then potentially we could have better lighting, maybe we could prevent some of these incidents from happening. Do you have those statistics, or is it something you could get?
Incident or accident statistics are held by ICBC, and we can get those anytime from them. And we'll use those in our decision making, and again, they will use that in terms of funding our projects.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, over the last 5 or 10 years, where the incidents have occurred.
I can guarantee you, if there's higher than average numbers, ICBC will come to us.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions from council? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Alicia.
So just doubling back on a question regarding 3rd Avenue revitalization from Jane, if the City of Port Alberni does not qualify for the grant, will the project be shelved?
CAO, do you want to comment on this one?
Okay. So if we have a grant application in for, I believe $400,000. If we're not successful with that grant application, then council will consider at that time what next steps are. And you'll likely consider whether you fund that project through other means, or whether you scale back the project, or whether you don't proceed with the project. But that'll be a decision to be made by council at that time.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take any audience questions if anybody has changed their mind. Okay. Alicia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This in from Bonnie on Facebook regarding spending. When will there be funds spent on the Greenwood Cemetery?
Thank you. Director Thorpe.
Madam Mayor, we do have amounts budgeted annually for the cemetery. I'd be happy to provide council with a spending and work plan if they wish. There's also, I think, been inquiries as well around things like irrigation at the cemetery as well. And if that's a priority of council's, I'd be happy to investigate those costs as well.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions to that? Okay. Thank you very much.
So we're going to move on to the subject of the McLean Mill and rail. I'll do my best with this question, and feel free to ask me to reiterate. Why is the Industrial Heritage Society, who operates city-owned assets on city-owned land, compelled to present a detailed report of their business plan and revenue projections to council and the public, while the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, who will be conducting business activities on city-owned assets on city-owned land, not compelled to provide a detailed business plan with revenue projections to council and the public? Why the different standard?
We have a manager jumping up to answer this question.
So, Madam Mayor, there isn't actually a different standard. So the Chamber of Commerce's plan was actually reviewed during the RFP process. And also the details of the award are on page 27 of the February 10th regular council meeting agenda, if community would like to reference that.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And another one in from Roland via email regarding McLean Mill. There was a notice in the paper about city leasing the McLean Mill property to the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. Terms of lease of other city property, such as those between the city and tenants at Harbour Quay, are regularly discussed at council meetings in public. What are the terms of the lease between the city and AVCC, the Chamber of Commerce? Please identify at which public meeting lease terms were discussed so that interested parties may go to the city's YouTube channel to watch that meeting.
Madam Mayor, on the January 27th regular council meeting agenda, you'll recall that we had that discussion. So the written response or written report starts on page 19 of that agenda. And if folks are interested in referencing the YouTube channel of that same January 27th meeting, actually at the 14-minute, 8-second mark of the video, they will see the report presented by myself.
Thank you for that very specific answer.
And continuing on with rail from Rob via Facebook, what is the city going to do about crossing replacements on Athol and Dunbar rail crossings?
CAO, did you want to answer this one?
We're aware that certainly that the Athol crossing might need some work. It looks like it's been damaged by something's hit one of the rails, and before we can run rail on that track, we'll have to have it inspected and ensure that it's safe for use. And those might be items that need some work. We don't know at this point, but before we operate rail, we'll have to have those inspected and repaired if necessary. I'm also aware that the regulations for crossings, street crossings, street and rail, are changing as well, and our obligation is changing, both as the street owner and as, in some cases, as the rail owner. So where we might share the cost, where somebody else owns the rail and we own the street, we'll be on the hook for 100% of the cost where we own street and rail. So we're aware of it, and there's no concrete plans at this point.
So if we were to put funds in our budget for rail this year, when would these things be addressed?
If you put if we put money in the budget for rail this year, for rail.
To operate.
Oh, to rail to operate, they'll have to be addressed before, at least to some of it will have to be addressed before operations begin to meet any minimum training standards.
So is the $25,000 that we're anticipating or we're suggesting spending potentially for rail maintenance, is that anticipating these costs?
Well, not knowing what the actual cost will be there, I can't say what the cost will be at crossings, if anything at all. So we don't know at this point if there'll be costs there. We do know from Island Corridor Foundation what the anticipated costs are on their approximately 5 miles of track between Stamp Avenue and McLean Mill. And our portion of track, if we just extrapolate from their figure, $25,000 we think is enough to get us operating. And but we can't stop there. There's more work to be done. We know there's some bridge work to be done at Dry Creek, and that is included in the 5-year plan submitted by IHS as well. So they're aware as well.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay, seeing none. Okay. We'll go back to Alicia.
Thank you. So, final question from Roland regarding the clock tower. The city indicates that in order to reduce contractor costs for repair or replacement of the clock tower at Harbour Quay, that some of the work could be done in-house with city resources. For the clock tower project, it has been determined that after using city resources, there in fact will be enough of a reduction for overall project costs to make the effort worthwhile. Let me do that again. The city indicates that in order to reduce contractor costs for repair or replacement of the clock tower at Harbour Quay, that some of the work could be done in-house with city resources. For the clock tower project, has it been determined that after using city resources, there will in fact be enough of a reduction of overall project costs to make the effort worthwhile?
And I would imagine we likely don't have that information yet, but CAO.
I'll take a stab at that. Council received a report on this matter yesterday, and using city resources was one suggested option, as was trying to reduce the scope of work and also seeking grant funding. So we haven't yet determined what impact, if any, using city resources would have on that project.
And we gave direction to go back and review those options. So I would expect that answer would come forward once those options are reviewed.
Potentially, council gave direction to essentially take no action to the budget, which would mean that the money currently assigned to the clock tower in the draft budget would presumably stay, and then staff will work on other options. I did meet today with the superintendent of parks, and we discussed the clock tower and options for using city staff.
Great.
So we've begun those discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Solda, did you have a question? Okay.
And further to that, I think building off of what Tim just said, what would the overall project expense look like when factoring in the use of city resources to complete the project as opposed to only using contractors to complete the project?
CAO.
And again, we don't know that at this point.
Thank you. Going to pause again at this point to see if any members of the audience would like to ask questions. It's really rare that people attend and don't want to ask questions. Come on forward. And if you don't mind just stating your name and address, please.
Hey, I'm an out-of-towner. My name is Bill Walker, and we own a mom-and-pop shop campground in beautiful downtown New Spey there. If you blink, you'll miss it. You'll have to excuse my attire. I wasn't prepared to speak. I'm also a volunteer conductor with your Alberni Pacific Railway. And I remember 3 or 4 years ago on a train with 180 people, all 5 coaches packed. And these people stopped and they came to see the train. And of course, when they stop to see the train, they are going to shop, they're going to eat, they're going to view your beautiful Harbour Quay, and they're going to do stay lots of neat things in Port Alberni. The problem is with our campground, lots of people are international. They've made their international bookings, and there's no plans to stop in Port Alberni whatsoever. And I asked them why, and I mentioned the nice things here. But every location has these, and you're competing with Tofino. where they have beautiful trails, they have beautiful shops. You need something unique to make people want to come here. Same with Coombs. You drive through Coombs, that place is packed. The Dutch people don't know how, can barely say goats on the roof, but they know about Coombs and goats on the roof, and they are going to stop there, and then they are going to Tofino. So folks, you need something unique here, something to differentiate you from your Tofinos or Coombs. You need something unique, and I think that would be the steam train. Another thing, people can't find accommodation in Tofino a lot of times. So what they do is they'll come all the way back to our campground, not knowing that, you know, what are the wonderful things you have here. And there again, if you have something unique to differentiate yourselves from all of these other places, which are also nice, just a little reminder there, if you choose option 3 for the steam train, people really don't have anything to come and see. Your other 2 options you're going to attract people off the highway in and spend money here in Port Alberni.
Thank you for your input. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to ask a question? Okay, back to online questions.
So this in from Marie from Westport. What is being done about providing our residents with a park, given the work going on at Rainbow Gardens? Can the city improve the small park located on Woodland Crescent East?
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're in the process currently of reviewing actually all of our park offerings, and there will be a report brought to council at your March 23rd meeting, where actually our Parks Operations Supervisor will be presenting to you the change at the Westport Park, as well as a variety of playgrounds and play structures throughout community.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
This is not a question, it's regarding the Rainbow Gardens Park that kind of was referenced. I had a meeting right after the last meeting that you were away, Madam Mayor, with Derek Appleton, who is the in charge of the project, and they're about to talk to a contractor, potential contractor, to go further with the park. You got to realize Rainbow Gardens 2 just opened in November, that particular building that the park is attached to. And so, of course, it's not finished. I mean, you got to give them an opportunity to go further with that. So they are moving forward. It will be a while. It's not going to happen yesterday, unfortunately, but it is.
Thank you for that update. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, we have 3 questions left from online thus far. 2 of the questions relate back to Uptown revitalization and the truck route. The first one being, what will be done to make Uptown area safer for those who use the area? What will be done to alleviate the problem of crime?
Okay. So we do have a few additional initiatives in our, we've got a couple people who are going to comment on this one, but additional to beautification, which of course we think is a piece of improving the overall look and feel, and certainly the public safety of the Uptown, bringing more people there and having the opportunity to have more businesses there that are attracting people as well. We are working on the public safety building, and we will ask for an update on that project. That was a piece of our strategic plan. And additional to that, we have formed a partnership with Canadian Mental Health Association as well. Our CAO might be able to update us on that project, where they have people walking around the community, cleaning up and looking for things like not only garbage, but like needles and things like that, that people certainly are a threat to public safety. There was one other thing that I wanted to comment on, but I can't remember now. So we will call on our new manager to come forward. Oh, it was our new community safety.
Manager of community safety, and one of your strategic priorities too is to include a manager of community policing, where we have more boots on the ground for RCMP, and now we have a civilian running that our volunteer program and our crime prevention programs. So we have already been a week and a half in working together with our new manager, and coming up with some ideas and some plans.
That's great. And is there any update you can share on the planning for a public safety building in the Uptown?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that we have a couple of ideas that we've been talking about. We went for a walkabout downtown with our management group recently, looking at some of the areas on 3rd Avenue. So I think that we have some more discussion, especially with our new community policing manager now that he's on board, and looking at what the needs are for our group as well. And because we will have bylaw, the volunteers, and myself in there. So I hope to have something for you or something in the next few weeks as well.
Excellent. Thank you. CEO, do you have anything to add?
Madam Mayor, you both mentioned a number of initiatives, including the Canadian Mental Health Association's Clean Team, which is active now. I would also suggest that the single best thing that we could do as a community to make the Uptown safer is put more people in the Uptown and more businesses, more thriving energy in the area. And Council has taken a number of steps in that direction.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Councillor Corbeil.
A piece that I didn't hear, unfortunately, which I think is probably the most important, is working on bylaws that will do something about empty lots and buildings that look bloody atrocious. Never mind the road and the sidewalks, there's buildings there that just look horrible. And until we do something about that, things aren't going to change. So I hope that people are discussing bylaws and doing it quickly so we can get on with it. Because honestly, there's buildings there that just, it's only a wonder there's so many empty buildings.
CEO, do you want to answer that, or do you?
I'll start. You can correct it. To that end, several staff met with Council in a shirt-sleeve session. Council will be aware. Several weeks ago, set some priorities for staff, work priorities, a number of which are already in the strategic plan. And staff are working on basically work plans to try to steps we could take to address those priorities, and we'll come back to Council in the near future with a work plan. And I can tell you that you brought us a number of initiatives, a number of priorities, which have been on the list of councils prior to this council. And if you were on council last term or the term before, you know there's a number of items, some of which we just heard, that are long-standing and are not unlike truck routes. They might seem like a simple solution, but they're multifaceted and difficult, and local governments have limited tools to address some of those things. So when we bring you that work plan, it won't include those things all being done by the end of April. There's some things that are going to take more time. We have limited staff resources, and there's some things that we can't do as a local government. One of the things we can do to limit storefronts or unattractive buildings or vacant lots or vacant buildings is create, foster economic vibrancy, so owners will want to improve their buildings, or business owners will want to lease those buildings. And that's one of the tools we have. As you know, the city's undertaken a facade improvement program for several years now. We've had some great success improving streetscapes that way. And we have tax revitalization initiatives. So we're taking a number of steps to try to do this. There's carrot and stick approaches, and using bylaws is certainly one approach, can have some positive effect. It's not the only approach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, we talk a lot about downtown revitalization as beautification, but it's not beautification. It's a very important economic tool for the downtown. It increases traffic to our locally owned independent businesses. It'll attract new businesses. So it's not beautification. It is economic development for our community, and it will also attract tourism. So I think there's more to it than just beautification. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Okay, and continuing on with the truck route piece, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a designated truck route in place rather than said traffic finding their own route?
So I think our intent is certainly not to let trucks find their own route, but as we've discussed already tonight, there's a number of challenges to determining what a truck route's going to be, and certainly a lot of things that are still up in the air as to how much of an impact they'll have, where trucks are coming in, going from, and this is an issue that we are currently working on and will continue to work on as we move forward.
Okay, we just have a few more in here. This from Janine via Facebook. Why is more industrial infrastructure being approved for a known floodplain?
CAO? I don't think we've approved any industrial
The
infrastructure.
question, I'm going to make an assumption, the question's about the...
About the sand group?
The sand group construction, Roger and Snap. Those lands are zoned for industry. There's no restriction. The city has a floodplain bylaw, and I'm looking at the manager of planning if she wants to summarize that. That bylaw, as I understand it, does not impact that location. Do you want to speak to the flood control or the floodplain bylaw? Are you able to off the cuff?
I could briefly summarize the floodplain bylaw. It's relatively short and straightforward, and it really is targeted to addressing the level at which buildings can be constructed, so like the height and the foundation. And I'm happy to bring back more information about the floodplain bylaw if that's of interest. I don't have it all off the top of my head, but it's like 3.65 geodesic meters or something like that. So that's really what it's about, and it doesn't have any implications per se with regards to the industrial development.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, if the concern is about the tsunami inundation zone, that is a different thing. Obviously, tsunami has literally more far-reaching effect, and a good portion of the city is in the identified tsunami inundation zone.
Perfect.
That's
Yeah,
a risk we live with every day.
For sure. And we haven't done any rezonings for that property, so there hasn't been any process for us to.
No. It was subdivided and it's being built on under current zoning, existing zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 questions left on deck, unless any other come through in the next few minutes. This one from Cheryl via Facebook. What is the town doing to help the aquarium at Harbor Key?
So at our last meeting of council yesterday, council voted to give a 3-month rent-free period to the aquarium, subject to seeing a business plan for how they intend to be financially viable long-term. So we are waiting for that information to come back, and we'll have more discussion about it then at that point. And certainly they haven't made requests beyond that at this point, but we're open to conversations. But we want to make sure that if we do provide assistance, that it's not assistance for 3 months and then we see them close down at the end of 3 months. We want to see the aquarium be viable and open to our community to provide that service long term.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to bounce over here.
Would council like to add anything? Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Just last night at the council meeting, just to make everybody aware, they are currently running several arms or aspects of fundraising of their own. So certainly it doesn't have to be all contingent on city council or the city. And I've already made my donation, so I've done my piece. But I encourage people to donate through their fundraising efforts, and hopefully that project will continue on for years to come.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we just had a new question come in from Roland Smith in regards to an answer given earlier in this evening. There is no mention of the draft operating agreement between the lease between the city and the AVCC as presented at the January 27th council meeting. There is no mention of a lease verbally at that meeting. An operating agreement is referenced, but no business plan or revenue projections were provided to council or the public by the AVCC. Where is the business plan and the revenue projections for the proposed activity at the McLean Mill property this year?
Director Thorpe.
Madam Mayor, perhaps CAO Ply could reference a process regarding the RFP process. So of course that discussion did happen in camera, and council has seen the business plan, etc. And I'm just not sure on public process regarding RFP and distribution of information.
CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So while council did make the decision in a public meeting to to select the proponent, the Chamber of Commerce as the proponent from the RFP process. The proposals received by council were not brought forward publicly. Council reviewed them in camera. And if council desires those documents, maybe some information might be redacted, but those proposals are publicly available documents. If council would like, we can bring those to a public meeting of council, attach them to an agenda. So if you'd like to pursue that, you could direct us to do that at your next meeting.
So just as a follow-up, I'm just looking at the January 27th meeting, and the agreement that we've signed is here in the public document. So I didn't understand the question to be asking about the other bidders.
I think the question is saying that the meeting referenced an operating agreement, not a lease.
Okay.
And perhaps the public notice referenced a lease.
Okay.
That might be the differentiation there.
And Madam Mayor, I interpret the question from Mr. Smith being around there was no business plan outlined, so although there is an operating agreement that was included in the public agenda, the specific nature of the initial budget presentation or business plan that would have been provided in the request for proposal package, in the bid package, was not included for public consumption.
Okay. Are there follow-up questions from council? Okay.
Okay, and this takes us to our last question, which is being grouped together. So one is from Coco Bean and the other is from Trish. Why does your spending rise year in and year out while our ability to pay doesn't? How about a year-by-year commitment to reducing services and spending?
All right. So, Madam Mayor, just to address this question, with the city's strategic plan, the current plan has no reduction in levels of service. We're looking at providing opportunities to look at ways to eliminate services that other levels of government could provide, or other agencies within the valley. The review of the services that would be considered redundant, we could probably look at those, but with the effects of inflation, increasing regulation that we see for all the services that we provide, we continue to see cost increases. So we understand the impacts on the taxpayer, and we're mindful of that, but at the same time, we're trying to balance providing the services that the public expects and the demands on the public as far as the taxation. And with local government, we only have one ability to generate revenue, and that is through taxation, unfortunately. We don't have other streams that we can provide opportunities for revenue, so they're very limited. And usually any service that a government provides, there's no business case for private the private industry to undertake that. So we're providing that gap for the community. We understand that all the regulations that are changing are impacting our services, and will continue to be as diligent as possible as far as the tax increases. So,
thank you. Okay, Councillor Corbeil.
Just a comment to that. Yesterday at our meeting, we seen the manager of emergency services from the regional district make a presentation where the city and the regional district jointly were applying for grant funding, and I was really thankful to see that, and hopefully we see more of that, where, as Andrew points out, that we've only got one avenue, and that's taxation. But if we can pool our resources, much like we seen yesterday, I think with the tax dollar will go a lot further. Hopefully that's not the last time we see something like that happen.
Absolutely. Any other follow-up questions or comments from council? Okay, and come on forward.
A couple questions, if I may. First one, on behalf of Industrial Heritage Society, I'm wondering, I don't have your full agenda for the evening, Will there be a decision made tonight on the rail based on, there's a lot of pre-work that has to be done before we could even operate? And the longer we wait for a decision, the tougher it's going to be to make all those commitments to be certified in all the areas that we need to be to operate a railroad. So.
Sure. So there's no formal spot on our agenda to make decisions tonight, but council is intending after the question period to discuss some of this and make recommendations. This is a committee of the whole meeting, so we can't make actual decisions tonight, but we can make recommendations to council, so those would be brought forward to our next regular meeting of council.
Which would be when?
23rd. Thank you. So coming up soon, but we do intend to vote on things tonight as well.
Okay.
So it'll be an indicator.
Second question would be regarding, and I'm not sure if it's part of the budget, but with the shortfall in the funding for the sewage lagoon, there's talk of maybe looking at the way you bill the residents for water usage and the sewer allotment. So with a family of two that doesn't use as much water into the sewer system, but I have an irrigation system that looks after my lawns and my gardens, I take pride in it, versus a family of 6 that doesn't look after their maybe their yard, but uses water for the consumption based on the number of residents. That all goes into the sewer system, or mine mostly goes into the ground, and yet I still pay the same allotment, and yet doesn't impact the sewer system as much. Will that be taken into consideration in your reviews?
That's an interesting question, and I think at this point that is not being taken into consideration, and there's no plan to change the way that we are currently billing for sewer. I'm not sure if we would have a mechanism to bill in another way, but possibly our director may want to come forward and comment on that.
Maybe using census as a factor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, you know, obviously we do a review of our fees and charges for both sewer and water annually. At this time, I can't provide any alternative option for sewer. We can look at other practices that other communities have, but at this time, I can't provide any answer to alternatives. So.
Thank you. But very good point.
Good.
Okay, come on forward.
My apologies, Chris Washington again, City of Port Alberni. I feel very discouraged when individuals ask about cutting services in our valley. If you remember, 20 years ago, we had 26,000 people here, and they all paid for the same, that amount of people paid for the services. We've lost people. We need to attract people back to our community, because if we increase the tax base, we won't have to see the increases that we're seeing. Well, if we have more businesses, so we need to look at growing, not shrinking. And that's what we have to look forward to. We need to put these incentives into place. We need to make our city look beautiful so the businesses want to come here, people want to come here, and that will grow your tax base, and that will minimize the increases that you have to see to the individual taxation, or to the individual taxpayer. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional online questions?
We have one more online question, and it's a combination between Blaine and Patricia. Why is the city considering raising taxes to spend money on projects that continuously lose money? The train and McLean's Mill need not be further funded by our city taxpayer dollars. Put the money into marketing the valley and its natural beauty, tourism, and make the people come.
So I can't necessarily comment on or provide an answer to all of that. It's a lot of opinion. But one thing that I can say is that we really recognize the need to market the valley properly as well. And we have some really amazing assets here. The ones noted, of course, being included, as well as other assets that are very unique as well. So one initiative that we are working on out of our strategic plan, and that there's momentum building up in the community around, is the municipal regional, the MRDT hotel tax. And we are excited to see we're excited to see a process coming back to implement that tax in our community. That's a tax it's basically a tourism tax for people who are coming and staying at hotels. And in most communities, in fact, I believe we're the only one on Vancouver Island who isn't currently charging it. In most communities, they use those funds to market their community. In Port Alberni, we don't have those funds coming in, so we use taxpayer dollars to market the community. And we don't necessarily have a dedicated amount of funds to do that. So we are working on getting that program back, and we see that as a great way to add funds to the community and really continue to market what we have here. Are there any additional audience questions? Okay. Any last council questions? Okay. Okay, so council, at this point, our intent is to go back through and recommend any changes we would like to see to our budget that would be brought forward to our next meeting to ratify or vote on at our next meeting. We do have a few things in our report today specifically that we can look to decide an outcome on. Additional to that, if there are other changes that council would like to see made, then we can make those recommendations tonight as well. So are there any specific items councillors would like to bring forward for consideration? Councillor Paulson.
I'm just going to throw this out there and just for discussion, but there's two items in here, the rail operation and the daycare creation project. If we, I'm just throwing it out there, if we opted for option 2 and also opted into the daycare total there for $76,390, and if we were to use funds from the $183,948 surplus from previous year, we wouldn't use up the whole thing. It comes to $174,190. Just throwing it out there as a thought. And as far as the Parks and Rec Reserve Fund, that's exactly what that reserve was initially initiated for in 2000, the year 2000. It was not set aside specifically for a pool. The majority of that is revenues from users. And it's an assurance that we can keep the facilities in good shape for the users. So it's not, the reserve isn't really a taxation, it's a fee from the users. As a matter of fact, if we're missing some funds to finish the clock tower project, I suggest that it should come from that reserve as well. But I'm just throwing it out there for conversation right now. Those two items, option 2 and the daycare, totals $174,000. It doesn't use the whole $183,000, and the reserve fund, the Parks and Rec Reserve Fund, that's exactly what it was designed for.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
I was going to say great minds think alike because I was doing the adding in here for the same thoughts, Councillor Polson. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think we should put those surplus funds into use this year for those costs for the daycare. And whether we ultimately decide to go for option 2 or option 3 of the rail service, I think it can also come from those surplus funds.
Council, so I would suggest that we basically make a list right now of all of the things we're considering adding in or taking out of the budget, and then we can discuss them one by one. So far I've got option 2 or option 3 for rail, but definitely something for a consideration for rail, and the daycare spaces fund. And Councillor Solda, did you have another?
No, I just regarding option 2 there.
If we could just hold off on having conversation about the options until I think Councillor Poon might have had a suggestion as well, and then we'll go through the options one by one.
No, I don't have any suggestions. I'm just waiting for you to
It's not
discuss.
it's not a suggestion. It's just because we're talking about tracks, and the tracks was only for option 3. The staff had put $25,000 to put into their budget for the tracks. Does that option 2 include that? That's what my question on that. That was a question, because that would change that whole picture on option B. Anyways, okay, thank
It
you.
includes $21,000.
So
for
I
truck
had
maintenance.
asked staff for a report on our debt load and how much debt and how much borrowing power we had. And I know it's not in the budget type of thing, but it is very important to note that. And I would like to know what's happened with that report.
CEO?
Madam Mayor, those, that data is being calculated. It's in process right now. It's all part of the, as I understand, tied up with the year-end calculations from 2019. So as soon as we have that information, we'll bring it forward.
Okay.
Will that be before we vote on the budget process?
I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but do we have a timeline?
So we do have a audit year-end timeframe. Our auditors are going to come in at the end of March till April 3rd. And at that point in time, any corrections or adjustments that need to be made to any of our financials will be done at that time. So we're probably looking at, if anything, around mid-April till end of April to get those results.
So it won't be available before budget voting?
I don't think so.
Okay, and second is regarding McLean's Mill. I had asked for a total for McLean's Mill because I've counted like, $750,000 by the time we do the dam and everything else that we're giving. So I would just like to, if you can correct me on that.
I recall the question. I thought we brought that as a response.
I just need correction.
In a question and answer document at one point.
You brought a chart, and I believe it was around $400,000. There was a follow-up question about the dam. I think possibly Councillor Zolda wasn't clear that the dam was funded partly last year or the year before, and then there was a small amount of funds added this year. I didn't think that a follow-up report was required on that, so we did have the number.
We can bring that information again to your March 23rd meeting if you like.
Okay. And I also had a recommendation to council regarding the 3rd Avenue. And do I need to make that now or it's a recommendation motion? And I believe I made that in the last meeting. Is that not correct? Because I see it in the minutes, in one of my minutes here. Does anybody want to?
So I will add 3rd Avenue to the list. We've got right now 3 different things that we're going to talk about. We'll talk about them one by one, and I'll call on you to make that motion.
Right.
And also, Councillor Haggard, at the last meeting too, there was going to be a recommendation regarding the signs. And Councillor Haggard was waiting for a report from staff, so we put everything on hold on that. And I'm just kind of curious to know regarding the report on the signs. Will we have it before budget? And so we can make that discussion, have a discussion on that?
CEO?
So the report on the signs is a background report, so it pulls together background information and information on signs in other communities. And our hope, our goal is that there be photographs of other signs, as well as costs incurred by those local governments who built those signs. The contractor reason to write that report is finding it difficult to get that information, so that's what's causing the delay on that report. I think that report will be in front of you in weeks, not months, and so you could give second reading to a budget as early as next week and withhold third and final adoption if you wanted to, pending that information. On the 3rd Avenue piece, there's I believe there's a report coming to the March 23rd meeting of council where you will be presented options for angle parking as well. And at that point, council can make a decision, hopefully make a decision, or tell us if you need more information around design, which will drive cost estimates.
And one other question, the existing signs that we have, how is that, how do we look after them? Because we have some existing signs that need some repairs, and if we're going for new signs, is this going to be in this budget, or is it in a budget that somewhere? So I'm just kind of curious to know, how do we fix the existing signs that we have?
Are you asking if there's a budget for maintenance on existing signs?
Yeah.
Maybe the
Madam Mayor, do you want to address these now, or are you taking a list still?
We can take a list. I have no problem.
we can answer that question and then
I'll ask
move
the
on. I don't think this is
Director of
an initiative to change that at all at this
Director of
point.
Engineering can speak to sign maintenance.
So maintenance of existing signs, I guess it depends on what the maintenance entails. If there's paint or finishes, we can do that through operational budgets. Generally, that's where that would come from. Unless there's a capital replacement or something, then that we'd look for other funds for that.
Okay, and one other question regarding the signs. We have a sign that was a focal point that was up at the Chamber of Commerce, is still waiting for a home. I mean, if we're going to go with signs, are we going to find a home for this sign that's been there for, where is it, at McLean's Mill or somewhere now? In
it's
storage?
at the work yard, yeah, in the parks.
That's another thing that I have a question on, and I know it's a budget item because it's very expensive to erect, I believe.
Yes, and we're not currently considering or asking for a specific budget cost on putting that sign specifically back up. If you'd like to make a motion to do that, we certainly could. Okay. Councillor Corbeil.
Just while Wilf's up there, the one sign that's been kind of shown on Facebook recently is that fishing capital sign at the foot of Johnson, and it does look pretty horrible, and I don't know how those go through the cracks, but it looks to me like it needs some sanding and some varnishing, and I'm sure there's more to it than that, but I don't know how those get missed, and maybe you could comment on what kind of maintenance program those sort of signs have, or is it even a city responsibility?
So I'm going on memory, and perhaps Director Thorpe remembers it better than I do, but I think there was an offer from somebody to actually take that and refinish it on our behalf. We just had to take it down. Is that
yes.
Is that your recollection?
Excellent segue. Madam Mayor, we explored actually taking that sign down off-site and dealing with it in pieces in the off-season, and we found that the cost is too exorbitant to do that. So it's actually part of our parks plan this summer, or spring-summer, to go to the site and look at any sanding, painting, and staining, etc. So city crews are already scheduled to be tackling that sign this spring.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other items that council would like to consider adding or removing from the budget at this time? Okay. Oh,
Madam Mayor, thank you. We've had one more question come in since. This is from Keith via email. I was recently walking Dry Creek Park and saw a group cleaning the brush. What is the city's plan with Dry Creek Park?
Come on forward, Director Thorpe.
Well, Madam Mayor, we are very excited to be partnering with a local disc golf club and working on Dry Creek Park. So our intention is to drive positive behaviors and increase traffic in Dry Creek Park. So what will be happening in the coming weeks is we're going to have a bit of an open house where the disc golf folks will invite the off-leash dog park owners to come together and discuss how we can operate concurrently. There's of course an existing off-leash dog park there at Dry Creek, as well as our intention to construct an 18-hole disc golf course as well. So I'd imagine the community members referring to some volunteers that have started some work there on brush clearing, and will be engaging city staff as well to be doing some cleanup.
Thank you. Sounds very exciting. Okay, so we will, Councillor Corbeil.
I don't think I'm adding this to any list, but I just need some clarification on this 3rd Avenue grant we're applying for. And I understand there was some sort of study done several years ago, and there's a bike corridor, and I apologize if anybody in this room had anything to do with it, but it's ridiculous. It goes up 3rd Avenue, up Neal Street, up Scott Street, where half of the Scott Street isn't even a street. And nobody in their right mind would ride their bike along that pathway. Does this grant actually look at a proper corridor?
Madam Mayor, the quick answer is no. So the grant is specific to the 3rd Avenue project. A whole corridor planning would be something through our active transportation plan.
And I'll just add to that, as part of our strategic plan, the CAO did recommend as a piece of our strategic work plan that council do a review of the active transportation plan. So it sounds like that may be of interest to you, and certainly, might make sense.
Now there's electric bikes, I might give it a shot.
So thank you for that question.
The archives.
Okay. So council, let's start with discussing rail, the easy one here. So we have three options for rail. We have option 1, which is 162 runs, 3 runs per day on Fridays, 4 runs per day on Saturdays and Sundays. And that is a subsidy from the city of $170,732. We have option 2 for 34 runs over 10 operating days, and that is a subsidy from the city of $97,800. And we have option 3, $30,000, no rail operation for this year, but focus efforts on locomotive restoration and track repair. And attached to that, the CAO recommends that if we go with option 3, and we are intending to get trains operating again, that we would add a further $25,000 for rail infrastructure. So there's no specific motion made. I know Councillor Paulson did suggest option 2. Councillor Haggard suggested option 2 or 3. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think option 1 looks a bit optimistic. I feel that option 2 is the way to go. We haven't really had a chance to promote the train this year, but really if we can get any train on the track this year, it's a good thing for us. We'll build momentum for future years. And then option 3, I don't think that's a possibility at all. I think we should not consider option 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solta.
Is it a recommendation or that we are making a recommendation motion that goes to a council meeting? Correct. So I'm going to make that a recommendation that we go with option 2, $97,800.
I just want to point out that going with option 2, which I'm not saying I'm against, but just so that everyone is aware, at a city contribution of $97,800 at 34 trips, that's $2,876 that we're subsidizing for each time we hear that train whistle.
Councillor Washington.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, but that out of that 97, that would include maintenance and stuff too. It wouldn't just be.
Mm-hmm.
So the least we can do is option 2 then.
So my question is, what happens if you don't make the revenues that you're expecting? And so this is a question to IHS. And I would very much like to go with option 2, but I have a lot of concern over the ability to charge $12 to an adult to ride the train from the train station to Stamp Avenue. I just don't know that you're going to get enough people to pay that to ride the train to meet your revenues. So what happens if you don't make that revenue? And I know this is a challenge of this year. I know you want to go all the way to the mill, but it's a concern.
Yeah, I think I've covered that in the last 2 times I've been in front of you here. It is definitely based, the budget is based on somewhat educated guesses. the sooner we can have the steam train running and promote it, the better we can do. Are there some options that we can look at? Maybe it's not just riding from the station to Stamp Avenue. Maybe there's some robberies. Maybe there's some other events that will attract people. So it's going to be up to us to work on building that. What do we do in the shortfall? Yeah, that's a good question. I know in the past when we looked at after McLean's Mill, when we had shortfalls, we had to try to eat it and make up next year. It's not an easy answer. We're not in business to go to the bank and cover your losses for this year with revenue from next year, that kind of stuff. So it is a concern for us by making this proposal to you. We think it's possibly doable. We have the same concern if it doesn't cut it. But I think not allowing the tourism part of the package to pay back some of that revenue of a couple $1,000s per run that you're going to be subsidizing by making a better tourist attraction for the community, utilizing volunteers to build that tourism package versus a business trying to do it. That's what we're all about, is saving the heritage, creating the tourist environment, and we'll have to deal with that problem when we come to it. Hopefully with some good management, good marketing, and good event kind of structure to it, we hope we can make that 4,000 people.
Thank you. Councillor Poon?
Yes, I'm just wondering if you've ever considered perhaps doing a season's pass where people pay for, say, $50 for a season's pass and they can ride whenever they want. Then that way the train looks full all the time.
Yeah, there are many options, and that'll be up to managing and marketing. We'll deal with that to our best ability. And what I've shown there, that 34 runs and 10 operating days, that's being maybe conservative. There might be some other options in there that we can look at too. Once all the certifications are done, the track is inspected, and the insurance is covered, it could be 36, it could be 38, it could be 40 runs, but that's the whole budget is based on that number. And if we have to do some extra things, maybe it's 2 weekends of Santa Claus instead of 1 weekend of Santa Claus to try to make revenue, depending on how the year goes. Well, it's tough at Christmas time to get that much for volunteers, but if that's what we have to do, maybe that's what we have to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haggard?
Do you have any ideas of who you're going to be hiring for a manager and also marketing manager? Or are you just going to put it out there, or do you have anybody in mind yet?
I won't say. We have had some conversations around what kind of strategy we'll do with a job description that we could talk to a few people about what's required. I have talked to some marketing people, and there's not enough money, I don't think, in option 2 to do what we would have done in option 1 with a marketing consultant. But I would think that we'll sit down and draft out a bit of a strategic plan with a marketing person, because we're not experts in marketing, and I think that's one of our downfalls when we ran McLean Mill. We didn't have that expertise to really market it. But we'll use the resources that we can afford to use and come up with a good plan. And the manager is going to be more concerned about making sure that we're certified and all the regulations are covered and all the reports are continually done instead of relying on a volunteer. And we'll do our best at it.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
I just have to keep remembering, you are looking after the city's assets.
Correct.
They belong to us, and I just have to keep looking at it like that.
Yep.
I do like the idea that you are looking at a proper budget, because I don't want overruns. Anytime I look at a budget and I write a budget, if I only have $10 left, I'm not going to spend any more than that. So that is important. So if you come back to council, I won't be very happy telling me that you went way over budget. That's me personally.
Well, one of the things we will struggle with is that there's a lot of upfront money that's going to be spent to get to the point of running. And then because we're looking at near into December for Santa Claus runs, you don't know what you're going to get for funding until the year is finished, and it's not like spending all the money up front and then, or getting the revenue and then spending the money. So we're asking you for this support, and we'll do our best to meet our commitment on it. But first, we have to get the infrastructure and the railroad running before we can even get revenue.
Thank you. Are there additional questions? Okay. I think we have a motion moved and seconded.
Good.
Then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. Okay, so seeing no additional questions, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. So we've allocated option 2, which was $97,800, 34 runs over 10 operating days for the train. Again, this is a recommendation to council, so this will be taken to our next council meeting. The next option that or item that we're talking about adding in is the daycare spaces planning funds, and that is $76,390. Councillor Haggard.
I'd like to make a motion that we allocate $76,390 in order to start work on our daycare space creation project so we can apply for the grant.
Thank you. So we've got that moved and seconded. Councillor Corbeil.
Again, before we jump to that, I would love to see what the regional district is going to bring to the table. As I said earlier, the backgrounder was there was a study on the Alberni Valley, and I'm sure people that live outside of Port Alberni bring their children to daycare inside the city limits, and I think it's unfair to the taxpayers of Port Alberni to have to fit the whole bill.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
So we have 2 people representing at the ACRD, which are going into budget talks, I believe. Is that correct, Madam Mayor?
Well into budget talks, and I
Okay.
think it would be incredibly unlikely to get an item this significant added at this point. So I think council has to, I think suggesting we take it to the regional district at this point means we're considering it for next year, not for this year.
Okay.
If that is the case and council gives that direction, I think that's very reasonable, but we don't know that this funding will be available.
So bite the bullet.
Next year. Yeah. And I just want to say that I really agree that this should be, that we should be talking to the regional district about projects like this and looking for opportunities. I think this is an opportunistic item for us in, it's very rare that you get $4 million potential grant funding at 100% from any level of government. I think we're jumping on an opportunity. As it was stated earlier tonight, we do have 1 childcare space currently in the community for every 6 kids in need of childcare. The provincially recommended number is 1 space for every 2 children in need of childcare. So we are in a pretty dire situation in the community, and I think that's only going to continue to get worse. So I think this is a really important initiative. Councillor Paulson.
I just go back, and I sort of agree, but this is time sensitive for the grants, and I think for a project like this, at $76,000 investment from the city is well worth it. Like yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Okay. So seeing no further questions. Oh, Councillor Haggard.
Sort of along the lines of Councillor Corbeil's comments is that I think in the coming year, I think we as a council should be looking at ways to equalize payments from the city and the regional district, such as in parks and recreation and policing costs. So those are things that we can work towards, but I really think for this, we need to jump on it.
Thank you. Okay. So seeing no further questions or comments on the motion to recommend to council that we include this in the budget, all in favor? None opposed? Carried. The next item we have Councillor Solda, that proposed motion for 3rd Avenue.
The proposed motion was to, and I just, before I make this motion, it's not that I don't oppose the project, okay? Just so people make it clear out in the public, I don't oppose it. But because we're not ready to move forward yet, I would like to move the following. It's a proposal, recommendation, following that council put half of the, believe 1.3 million into contingency fund for the Uptown revitalization budget year 2020 and add the other half for the budget of 2021. And the only reason I'm stating that, stating that is that we, guess that solves that.
Okay. And were there any additional items? Councillor Haggard.
Are we going to discuss this about putting the surplus into this budget? Does that have to be a motion?
No, so I think Councillor Haggard is referring to item 1 of this report, which is the $183,948.
I'd like to make a motion that we put the surplus from 2019 budget of $183,948, put it into the operating funds for 2020.
So which would effectively reduce the two things we just added in, and we would end up still just under 4.3% for our budget currently. Sorry, I should have let you second that. Councillor Washington, do you have a comment? Okay. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Are there any other items? So item 4, if council would like to discuss, is to draw funds from reserve. Are there any councillors who would like to propose all or specifics? Councillor Washington.
I think with Echo Center turning 50 recently, I think they're going to need their reserves, and I think it's a wise idea just to leave it all alone.
And I would really agree. I think that there have been, a lot of situations in the past and throughout this budget process, we've talked a few times about reserves being drawn down, like the equipment replacement reserve fund had, multi-million dollars taken out of it for other purposes. I think that we have a lot of work that's going to be done in future years, and it's important, and big initiative projects like hopefully a pool. I think it's important for us to leave these reserves in place for bigger projects if it's not absolutely dire situation to use them today. Okay. So seeing nobody making a motion otherwise, that's all we technically have on our agenda today. Again, council could make any other suggestions that they want or recommendations. Councillor Solda?
Yeah, I'm going to make a recommendation motion, please, that the City Council look to the other 3 business areas to put an upgrade plan in place. I know we have one for Johnson Road, commencing with Redford and 10th Avenue, Lower Johnson and Upper Johnson, to be placed on the agenda for next year's financial plan for discussion. And the reason for Redford first is because...
I'll second that.
Okay, sorry.
If you want to continue.
And the reason for that is because we have development going on at ADSS, and there's going to be a lot of new residents up in that area. There's also other developments up in that area, and where do they all... They'll probably go shopping in that area. Also, the Redford corridor is an artery into this community. Either you take a left or you take a right. So it's time to clean up that area and then work our way to the other side. So I think we need to have that discussion at a next budget meeting for next year.
I'm going to ask that you just reread the motion a little slower, just so I can make sure I understand.
Yeah, okay. I'll move that recommendation that the City Council look at our other 3 business areas to put an upgrade plan in place, commencing with Redford and 10th Avenue, Lower Johnson and Upper Johnson, to be placed on the agenda for next year's financial plan.
Questions or comments? Councillor Boone.
I don't support this. I think that this motion is too broad and that we must focus our efforts on not just everything.
Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, we're just going to be spending 1.3 maybe more $million on Third Avenue, and we have more areas in this community to look at, and they need to be looked at too. And it's not fair that it's just Third Avenue. Redford is in Desiree's Strait too, and it needs work. We did do some work previously a few years back, and we put some trees. Did you look at those trees? They're kind of, on that particular street, and it needs some work. It doesn't mean it's going to need a $1.3 million work on Redford, but it does need some. You got tourists still coming into town. You want them to come to Third Avenue, come down Redford, take a look at what Redford has. Look at what 10th Avenue in that whole corner block. It's not very pretty up there either. So it's time to look after other areas in this community just as well. It's just a discussion at the next budget meeting when we discuss the next financial plan. Sorry.
Councillor Paulson.
I think you included Upper and Lower Johnson in that motion as well, and Upper and Lower Johnson is in progress as we speak, so.
And we do have a plan for them.
We do have a plan for that, so I don't know if it needs to be part of the, yeah.
Councillor Haggard.
May I ask Councillor Soul just to clarify, do you mean discuss a work plan at our next budget meeting or next year at our budget meetings?
I'm talking about for the financial plan 221 to 225, I think it is, 225. I'm not, 226, sorry. It's just.
So for next year?
Exactly. I'm not talking about doing it this year. We
Okay.
can't afford to do it this year.
Okay. Any other? Councillor Corbeil.
I'm just asking for some clarity here. Again, I'm hearing these huge numbers, and from what I gather, the city would spend up to $500,000 on Third Avenue, applying for up to a $400,000 grant, and there's potential for water and sewer costs, but that's only if necessary. Am I correct with that?
You are correct. So I have that on my list here to correct. The city's budget for the Third Avenue project is $500,000, not $1.3 million. $1.3 million was a number that was stated in a report that we received as an estimate, but that's not what we're budgeting for this project. So we're not anticipating spending that amount. So I will just, I'm going to speak against this, and the reason being is council put a lot of time and effort into developing our strategic plan, and I really strongly believe in that strategic plan. I think that we spend a lot more time than a typical council does developing that, and that's because we wanted to have a plan that we would actually move forward with. I know that, last council, myself, Councillor Paulson and Councillor Washington sat on, and we developed a strategic plan that none of us really believed very strongly in. And subsequently, none of it really got implemented. It was a strategic plan where almost nothing got done out of it. And after sitting on that council for 4 years, it doesn't feel very good to have, to look back at your strategic plan and think, we didn't really do any of this. We did other things, but we didn't really do anything out of our plan. I think it's really easy to hear feedback from the community or feedback from pushback on the projects that we're doing and start to question whether our strategic plan is the right direction or not. I think it's healthy to hear that input and review our plan and determine if it is still the way for moving forward. But I don't think starting new plans midway through and starting to look at developing other areas that really go completely outside of what our strategic plan says we're going to do is good governance. So I would like to see us stay the course with our strategic plan. And frankly, I really would be very frustrated if we put more money into developing plans rather than continuing to put money into actioning those plans. This council has spoken a lot about wanting to make change and action the work and do the work rather than spending more money on plans. So we have a Johnson Road charrette. I believe the city spent $40,000 on that plan. We have an uptown study that was done a few years ago. We have an uptown study that was done in 1983. We have the Waterfront North study that the city spent $25,000 on, and Hoopachesset and Sashot each spent $25,000 on additional to that. I don't want to see us spend another $50,000 or $100,000 to develop plans for different areas of town that we're not going to action. And this is certainly what that motion says to me. We're not going to develop plans for free. I would suggest that we stay the course on our strategic plan. And if there is a desire from council to change course, that we give that really serious thought before just changing course.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, again, I don't disagree with the Johnson Road project. I just like to have the Johnson Road project to be ready to go. You're not going to dig up the streets and do whatever you're going to do in the middle of summer. And so...
Are you referring to the 3rd Avenue project or the Johnston Road project?
Sorry, 3rd Avenue, sorry. And so that is why I wanted to put the money to the side till we're ready. And anyways...
But that's not the intent of your motion right now.
I'm just explaining that one because it sounds like I'm not with the strategic plan. That is untrue. Second is the Johnson, all these other areas. It was for discussion at the next, when we had the discussion regarding the 2021 financial plan. It didn't mean it's going to happen or anything. It was a discussion to start discussion on the these other areas in our community that need some work too. So it's up to council. So fine, I just brought it forward. That's all.
Councillor Corbeil.
I think, as Councillor Solda says, it's just for discussion purposes, and I think Redford, and the first thing you see as you come into town is that big empty lot on the corner of 10th and Redford, which I believe is somewhere in our strategic plan. So probably some of the issues that Councillor Solda is bringing up are already covered off the strategic plan. So the discussion I don't think is hurtful in any way, and I don't think we're attaching any money to it. And I'd be very curious to see how many things we have in our strategic plan that might solve some of those issues.
Address some of those areas already, absolutely. Okay, Councillor Haggard.
I really appreciate what your thoughts, Councillor Solda, and I understand where you're coming from, but I think if we start to spread ourselves too thin, then we get nothing done. And it's not, what we do get done will not be as effective as what we would like it to be. So I agree with the mayor. I think we need to steer the course, and perhaps the next council can look at those other areas. When we are looking at Johnson Road right now, so that will probably be done hopefully with our term, so that will be 2 major areas taken care of. So, and as Councillor Corbeil said, I think some of those issues will be solved in our strategic plan as we move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Washington, did you have a comment?
Oh, just going to remind you that Councillor Poon had her hand up, but I'll take the mic just for a minute and echo Councillor Haggard. Like you said, this strategic plan, we're actually getting it done, and we'll do what we can this year. We'll pull it out tomorrow or next year before the budget and see what we can attack on it. I'd love to have that novel finished by the time we're done here.
Thank you. Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I think the discussion that Councillor Solda is referring to should have happened at our strategic planning session. But as it is past now, we should stay the course and continue with implementing our strategic plan.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Solda? Okay, then on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Or, sorry, defeated, not carried. I'm so used to saying carried. Okay, would anyone like to make any further recommendations? Okay. Then would somebody like to move adjournment? I'm sure that was seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.